Every hero you've ever admired, from Christ to Caesar to Zarathustra to maybe a fiction character, they all have one thing in common. They are solar symbols, literally sun men. And this is the most important spiritual symbol we need to understand. My computer's dying, but we're going to keep going forth. What is the sun? The sun, it represents life, light, gold, perfection, excellence, power, heat, glory. This is why every great spiritual tradition, every high culture across history, it points back to solar qualities. And that's because the sun is the primary ideal. It's the first principle that we should seek to understand and embody. If you want to live a truly excellent life, it is becoming more sun-like as you progress. And this is why the solar ideal I'm putting forth here is the higher ideal of my spirituality and the culture I would love to exist within. So if we want to talk about virtue, the meaning of life, the spiritual path, greatness, self-actualization, everything we talk about on this channel, our conversation needs to begin and end with the sun. So let's talk about the solar state. So I once stood in the middle of a festival and I felt so alive. I had been dancing for maybe 5-6 hours straight. I was surrounded by my friends, by so many people I loved. The music was just excellent and the night was flaming with fire and I was in a total flow state. And in that state, that solar state, I felt kingly, I felt open, I felt electric. And people turned towards me for double takes. I literally had women lock eyes with me from across the crowd, traverse the entire dance floor to come dance with me. And I had more compliments from strangers in one night than I had received in years. This is what I would call the solar state. And of course, the solar state is the most fun state in life. It is where you are fully alive. You are in your essence and expressing your essence naturally. We experience this state when we're really tapped in during meditation, during sports, during flow states like fighting, dancing, making love, all activities that bring us into our essence and energize the machine. They're solar in nature, right? But I want to be very clear here. And that is that solar spirituality and like the solar ideal I'm putting forth here, it is not just an emotional high. In fact, chasing moods, chasing, MDMA states at festivals or X, Y, or Z, it's not sustainable. And in fact, it leads you quickly to rock bottom, which is actually anti-solar in nature. So having had all of these different experiences where you feel like you're in your Sun King moment, right? Having had these experiences, you're like, okay, how do I live a more solar life in general? In a deep, sustainable way, how do I cultivate authenticity, vitality, and authority in a way that absolutely affirms life? That's actually magical, that transforms life around me. So I've been questioning this sentiment for a long time, for many years here. And the thing is I've explored Christianity, love Christianity. I've explored the pagan traditions, the spirituality and mysticism of the East, the esotericism of the West. And it kind of feels like I've been spiritually homeless for a long time. They seem like they're all kind of pointing back towards solar qualities, but I never quite understood that I'm here to walk a solar path. Until recently. Out here in Peru, I'm probably on the most sincere spiritual quest of my life. And every single day, when I'm hiking in the mountains or hanging out with friends or working, I ask the question of how do I live in a state of higher energy, power, love, and connection? How do I establish myself in something that is more deeply centered, more unconquerable? And in short, I'm asking the question of how do we become sun men? What is that? What is that as a spiritual quest, right? As a spiritual ideal? And I've identified a few keys from this journey that I wish to share with you. So number one on the solar path is obviously increasing energy. The more energy you live with, you put life on easy mode. I've had to learn this the very, 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 very hard way because low energy has been like the marker of my path. Chronic insomnia, chronic health issues, all these things, right? So vitality is the first principle on the solar path. And yes, self-overcoming is possible when you're weak and tired. In fact, that's a very solar act, overcoming circumstances, overcoming yourself. But all these things like self-overcoming, heroism, genius, art, expression, they all come naturally when the machine is energized. It is a natural expression of your intuition, of your gut, of your center, right? So Nietzsche understood this, right? We've often talked about Nietzsche on this channel. In Ecce Homo, his autobiography, Nietzsche spends entire chapters, not on abstract philosophy, but literally discussing digestion, diet, environment. In fact, Nietzsche, the most prolific philosopher of our age, boiled down most of his genius to periods of rapid metabolism. That's crazy, right? And this goes to show us that genius is essentially about energy in thought and action. And a smooth mind, a smooth life, comes from smooth digestion. You'd be astonished how slow metabolism, slow digestion unconsciously affects you. Like most emotional hangups, Nietzsche noted, most spiritual blockages, prejudices, they trace back to the intestines. And for years, I've learned this the hard way. I've battled with so much fatigue, gut pain, and chronic constipation, to be blunt with you. And leisure was never restful. At 25, my body felt broken from all the abuse it went under. And it kind of led to this turning point moment for me where I was like, fuck this, forcing myself to write books, to build businesses, to be great, to do all this stuff in the outer world. It doesn't matter if I don't have my vitality. And as I've consciously and rigorously experimented with location, environment, diet, right? Life hack for everyone here: eat only fruit in the morning, eat mostly meat, veggies, and eggs in the afternoon and evening. If you do that, your digestion will get cleared out, so it would be so much better. But anyways, I've been rigorously experimenting with vitality, and out here in Peru, this is me renting a dirt bike high in the mountains. For the first time in maybe 14 years, I sat by a lake and I just had exquisitely smooth thinking. Exquisitely smooth feeling so connected to a higher principle in life, feeling so connected to God in every meditation. And I'm basically back at baseline for the first time in a long, long time. And this just showed me so bluntly that metabolism, what is metabolism? Metabolism is literally your capacity to consume life and turn it into light, turn it into energy. It is exactly what the sun does. It consumes everything, right? It breaks down the atom, it consumes the darkness, and exudes light constantly. And this is why I think as we focus on solar qualities, it puts life on easy mode. The other reason life goes on easy mode as you increase energy, right, is where does intuition come from? Where does action come from? If we look at the three centers of man, they come from your gut, right? You have the heart, the mind, the gut. The gut region is where intuition, great ideas, natural living, and powerful action comes from, the will, right? So the more that you focus on vitality and clear out that lower dantian, the more solar you become in naturally. If you struggle with overthinking and struggle with inaction and feel like your life is forceful, like you have to use a lot of effort, it's because you're living in a lunar way or a subterranean way. The more that you can focus on metabolism, vitality, and intuition, the more solar you become. In fact, your life becomes an effortless expression of your soul. This is the entire goal on the solar spiritual path, is not to effort things. It's to intuit and overcome things from the gut, really. So living with power instead of force. So the second principle on the solar spiritual path I'm putting forth here is presence, solar presence. Here's a picture of me doing a little meditation at the top of the mountains out here. And the paradox of building solar vitality, right? Building greater energy and willpower, it begins with surrender. In the East, in the Tao, they would call this the yin. In the Tao Te Ching, one of the great wisdom books of the world, it says yin before yang, surrender before action. Because if you stand on your tiptoes, you'll be easily knocked over. If you try to sprint, you won't go that far. And if you're always in the parasympathetic nervous system, your body will never rest. You'll never take good shits. So right here. So basically in the Tao Te Ching, it speaks of meditation as about surrendering into the heart, allowing the waters to settle. It's not about trying to get somewhere. It's about sinking deeper into your essence. And when you meditate in this way, it's amazing what happens to me is after 10, 20, 30 minutes, when I come into a deep place of presence, of stillness, some kind of fire awakens inside of me, some kind of warrior spirit, a greater will, a greater presence. It feels like my solar self is opening his eyes. And this is why, like, if you're always running around, if you're always busy, if you're always in the parasympathetic nervous system, right, you're never going to actually tap into the solar state, this solar spirituality. Virtue, in the Tao Te Ching, or what it calls ancient virtue, is essentially action that embodies the way, meaning action that embodies the solar nature. But in order to have real ancient virtue, to move with the Tao in that sense, to build solar vitality, we need to be connected to our essence, right? We need to be connected to presence. So also in presence, as we've been speaking of, it connects you to your intuition. The more still you can get, the more intuitively you can live your life. So that is the solar path to me. Now, we've talked a bit about surrender and increasing vitality, but I don't want anyone to get the idea that like the solar spiritual path is about like all surrender or animalistic well-being or just like having vitality. It's actually goes deeper than that. It's about contrast maxing, as I've often spoke about, right? Surrender is one part of the coin, but it's not wholly the way of the sun. In fact, when my life is dull, surrender loses its potency. Let me repeat that. When my life is too dull, surrender loses its potency. When I just went out and tried to meditate in the mountains again, and slowly my meditation started to lose their fire. There was too much yin in my life. I was too decompressed, right? Hence, I became spiritually flaccid. And this is where we need tremendous amounts of self-knowledge, is as you live your life, asking the question of what increases vitality, what increases holistic vitality, spiritually, mentally, socially, physically, technologically, like what is the antithesis to going spiritually flaccid. So when I went spiritually flaccid the other week, my second week here in Peru, this line to me always comes back, and it's like, God hates the lukewarm. He hates the lukewarm. So what I did is like, I went out dancing, right? And I was dancing for 2 hours straight. I talked to a beautiful girl. We had a great conversation late into the night, and I left feeling stimulated. I left feeling alive. I also left feeling like I'm never going to find the true love of my life ever because no one meets my standards. But regardless of all of this, I had some fun. I had some dark thoughts. I felt stimulated by love, lust, attachment, fear, all these things. And then I went and surrendered under the stars into a deep meditation. In fact, the best meditation of the week, right? And I realized that it's only in contrast that I fully awaken. It is only through consuming all of life, right, that we can energize the spirit to the highest goal. And this comes to one of the principles I've often talked about on this channel, and it's the third principle in the solar path. And that is all spiritual and creative growth. It comes from heat. You're not going to hear many people talk about this. The fact that the authentic Buddhist monks, they didn't meditate in peaceful gardens. They meditated in tiger-infested wildernesses, in haunted caves, because they wanted to use fear as stimulant to awaken to a higher level of consciousness, right? All spiritual and creative growth comes from heat. Like your greatest art, your greatest music, it's going to come during heartbreak, right? How can we live in a way that consumes the heat of the world and channels it upward? That's the solar path, and that's the third principle. After increasing energy, increasing presence, and then increasing heat. This is contrast maxing, right? So the heat of the excitement of a new girl, sex itself, pain, suffering, grief, addiction, challenge, desire, ambition, glory, all these things, the more intensity that you live your life with and the more consciousness and presence you can bring into that intensity, I would call this solar tantra. Tantra is essentially presence through the extreme circumstances of life. The more intensity and contrast you create, right, the more you awaken. This is what we would call stealing fire from heaven, and that's going to be my next video, so subscribe for that. So let's go to the fourth principle here, and that is virtue, okay? So Contrary to Nietzsche, I believe, let me make sure we're still recording. Okay, we're good. The lighting really sucks here. I got to get a better studio set up, maybe turn this a little bit. But contrary to Nietzsche, I believe morally correct actions actually have metaphysical impact. Okay. So I believe that we have a biomagnetic field around us, an aura, let's say, and doing actions that are virtuous, that are about speaking the truth, living with sincerity, living with excellence, right? They literally like strengthen your biomagnetic field, aka your soul, or your soul, SOL, right? So positive actions of self-overcoming make you stronger, more golden in your aura, set your soul on fire. And negative actions that hurt yourself, that are vices that make you feel cloudy, that drain energy, X, Y, or Z, they weaken your aura, right? And they're anti-solar in that. So for instance, keeping your word to a friend, well, I kind of went into this. Like keeping your word literally grows your metaphysical power, right? Likewise, exercising your will in work, meditation, true speech, empathy, heroic action, they grow the muscle of the solar state, right? I think of my dad. My dad is a very virtuous man. He'd wake up at 4:30 a.m. every morning to go for a run or a long bike ride before going to work. He hates lying. He hates stealing. He lives in a way where he brings a lot of energy into his social interactions, into his leadership, into the world. My dad is a man of virtue. And when you meet my dad, you meet a man who does have a very strong aura about him. He's very solar in his nature. And it's because he's been exercising the virtue of living a life with energy, with vigor since day one of his existence. And he's a great inspiration to me and an inspiration to us all. Is the more virtue, the more solar virtue we live with, like standing strong in stressful situations, having courage, living with energy. But also my dad needs to learn this one a little bit. Leisure maxing, how to lounge like a god, not leak energy on distractions, and then act with energy but without ego. This is like how we start building a solar kind of virtue. And this has taken me a long time to learn. I was on the path of stealing fire from heaven for too long. Now I'm on the path of building virtue. So I would essentially define virtue as the positive cultivation of energy. This is what Qi Gong is, right, in the Taoist system. Cultivation of energy and virtue, right? So virtue is the positive cultivation of energy and harmonious expression of that energy. Vice, on the other hand, in this system, is those things that make you feel cloudy, right? Like gooning to porn all night, or chasing fleeting desires, or lying, or being a coward when you're called to leave a relationship. All of these things leave you metaphysically weaker. They're anti-solar. They are lunar, right? And so this actually comes full circle back to Nietzsche, crazy enough. Is Nietzsche said, what is good? All that increases power and strength. All that is expressed from a place of power or strength. Those are good. Those are virtuous. For instance, kindness, right? That comes from a place of power and magnanimity, like paying for all these people's meals because you're just feeling very generous. That kindness is very good, right? But kindness that comes from a place of insecurity, right? You're trying to get someone to like you. That kindness is bad. And working out as an expression of vitality is good. But working out like a distracted and distressed chimp because you should, that is bad. That is anti-solar. So in a way, this is the Nietzschean philosophy, right? Doing those things which increases vitality and act in a way that expresses your vitality into the world, right? But I want to speak a dangerous truth here, right? The solar path is not always obvious or standard. And this is not for everyone to hear, really. No one could have told me not to go down the incredible roads of suffering, addiction, loneliness, homelessness that I went down. I'm way too freaking stubborn. I live my life in a very extreme way. And I went so boldly into hell, a hell that lasted it wasn't one dark night of the soul. It wasn't one rock bottom. It was like 8 years of rock bottoms, right? But in hell, what is hell? Hell is full of heat, right? Like if you ever have been addicted to something, your life is just basically heaven or hell. It is so much heat. It is so much suffering. It's kind of like being in a toxic relationship, right? And because there's so much heat, I had to generate so much like power and virtue in order to slay the dragons and earn real freedom again. And this is why no matter what tragedy befalls you, I'm not saying to seek out suffering, right? I'm not saying to destroy yourself with addictions or bad relationships or, live a very vice life. But I am saying is if that's where you are, if you've been dealt the hand of tragedy, of intensity, of a lot of pain right now, realize that all of that heat is actually what is going to generate great art and great spiritual growth if you can build the power to slay the dragon and earn freedom. I wrote a whole book about this called The Psychology of Slaying Dragons. So the majority of the man I am today, right, is born of the fact of how I cultivated presence and victory from the absolute extremes of suffering, of how I cultivated presence and victory and stole a victory from rock bottom, right? So that is why for the aristocrats of the soul that I speak to, there's no general right and wrong, right? It is like, how can we live a life that's connected to our deepest intuition, that's connected to the solar qualities, and fucking just go forth boldly, because you're going to make a million mistakes. But can you learn to channel those mistakes and channel the heat of life upwards? That's the solar path, right? But in general, I think virtue should be encouraged here. Like, fucking renounce the shit that's dragging you down. Affirm the shit that is solar in nature, right? Let go of these self-destructive behaviors and cultivate that solar vitality. And then to all the wayward sons out there, to all the aristocrats of the soul that are too stubborn to take my advice, I wish you the best on your hero's journey. And I hope to see you on the other side. Hopefully we can inspire your return to glory here. So now I want to get into some solar practices that are so freaking awesome. I can't wait to run workshops. Right now, my friends, I am the leader of the Men's Academy online. It's online brotherhood. And a couple of the brothers from this YouTube channel that we've met here, we're traveling the world together. We're building an awesome business together. The Retribalized project has begun, my friends. This is going to be very fun. But in that, one day I want to have a real life academy. That's my dream. I want to have the greatest holistic, leaders, trainers, and teachers out there in one place where we are cultivating this spirit of excellence, of solar excellence together. That would be amazing to live in an academy setting. And the thing I would love to teach in that setting is contrast practices, okay? And contrast practices are practices of intensity that help you overcome the ego and develop soul presence. What do I mean by that? To give you a brief example before we talk about fighting, making love, and dancing, I want to talk about solar walking, because this is the easiest way to see the solar state is to walk, right? So take a walk through a public park. I loved walking Sloan's Lake when I lived in Denver. Notice how most men walk. They're listening to a podcast. They're hunched over. They're walking too fast. They're on their phone. A lot of them are distracted. Walk like them for a minute. Just like walk normal, right? See how you feel. And then slow your gait down. Open your chest. Walk like a king. Walk with leisure, right? And turn your eyes up to the horizon and feel solar energy emanating from you. It is wild when you walk with relaxed confidence like that to see how you feel. You're going to enter into a solar state, right? And then just go back and forth and play with your physiology and notice how much your physiology, just how you walk, changes your mood, your mind, your frame, everything. This just shows you that the solar state, it can be cultivated in the way you live your life, right? Through how you use your body, how you frame your mind, where you put your eyes, these things, you can start cultivating solar qualities, right? Now we want to test our solar state through the extremes of life, right? The solar tantra. So this is where contemplative dance and contemplative martial arts are so amazing. I was just at this dance workshop here, right? And basically at the dance workshop, you would go out and dance for 10 minutes. You dance with girls, dance solo, you just dance for 10 minutes. And then when the music stopped, you'd go back to your seat and you would meditate for 5 to 10 minutes, right? And during your meditation, you'd come fully back into your essence, into your heart. And I would start questioning, how did I just dance? Was I in my ego? Was I seeking something? Was I like wrestling with fatigue? Or was I feeling the music and dancing from my center? Then you'd go back out and dance and then come meditate and then go back out and dance and then come meditate. And through this contrast, I slowly like sloughed off all of these different attachments, wanting to dance with the cute girl or like not really feeling this type of music or whatever. And slowly I just came into this point where I'm just like in my essence and I'm just freaking dancing raw. I'm like fully alive, right? And even when I dance with someone, it's just like we just flow into a dance. It's beautiful, but there's no like blockages inside of me, right? So this idea of contemplative contrasting dance, you can apply to martial arts, making love, creative work, anything that you do with intensity, right? So martial arts sparring is a great one. If you do sparring matches, right, do 2 or 3 minutes of sparring with a great partner, and then both just drop into meditation for the next bell ring for 2 or 3 minutes and come back into your center, right? And then have this contrasting experience where there's all of this intensity and then all of this surrender. And while you do this, you can come into this place where you start sparring as a natural expression of your soul. What we're doing in these practices is we're cultivating solar presence, right? In a way that when we work, we're not working with ego, attachments, thoughts of the future, fear, lust. We're just working as a natural expression of our superior self. Same with fighting, dancing, socializing, making love, hiking, all of these things. Like, how can we do it in a more solar state of presence, right? So I think having practices like that is very important. And hopefully through these practices, right, through the 4 steps I've just listed between increasing energy, presence, stealing, contrast maxing or stealing fire from heaven, and then virtue, and then having these practices, what we're trying to do is reach the goal of energized wholeness, okay? Wholeness is solar, and I've been not whole for most of my life, which is amazing because I've had the contrast to see where to truly aim my arrow of my highest hope. And I want to read you a quote from Mozart, right? The great musician. And he was perhaps the most light, powerful, genius composer of all time. He was so solar as an artist. And here's what he said about creativity, right? He said, "When I am, as it were, completely myself, entirely alone and of good cheer, say traveling in a carriage or walking after a good meal, or during the night when I cannot sleep, it is on such occasions that my ideas flow best and most abundantly. Whence and how they come, I know not, nor can I force them." So this might seem like a tangent, but it's actually like so telling about life, is that when we come into a place of good cheer, of contentment in our solitude, of presence, right? When we become totally ourselves, this is where genius flows from. This is where intuition flows from. This is where your best ideas, your greatest relationships, your greatest leadership, they all come from energized wholeness. And on your screen right here, here's a picture of me. I love this picture of me because it captures one of the best seasons of my life. And this was a season where I had retreated into the mountains after like 6 months to a year of struggling with sobriety, of leaving, basically getting over my ex-girlfriend we were together for 5 years. And like just going through so much insomnia. Like I couldn't sleep for more than an hour a night kind of insomnia, health issues, all this shit. And this was me like having victory over all of it. This was my 27th birthday. And on my 27th birthday, right, after all this searching, I retreated into the mountains and I had so much resistance to going there. I was like, I don't want to just be alone in the forest for another fucking month of my life. I've spent years alone. I don't want more solitude, but I was like, screw it. And I went out there and I just surrendered, right? And it was there, I was hiking in the high alpine, that I found such deep, incredible joy, insight. I found my radiant self. It was like a returning to energized wholeness. And it was in this state that I started my second channel, Christian Bell 2. You can go watch that channel in the beginning to see like what I was talking about, where I was at. I was very just alive, right? And when I returned to that energized wholeness, I went back into life. I met all these friends. I actually met my next girlfriend immediately after that. Basically, I felt so aligned that my work transformed, my relationships transformed, and inspiration just struck me every single day. And I poured it liberally into my life, and it kind of inspired me for months to come. So, this is what I want to say here is after like a decade of, trial and error, of glimpsing the solar path, going back down on deep lows, for me, I think I found a center that endures. I think the solar spirituality feels like the thing that can contain all of me, and a path that produces not only excellence here on earth, but also a deeper connection to the spiritual world. How can we live as sons? And this is not just about a state of being. This is about cultivating a deeper authenticity in life, right? A deeper vitality, power, love, and self-knowledge than ever before. And as we do that, we become sun men. So if you want to walk with me side by side, find other men on this path to discuss philosophy, spirituality, and self-actualization with, my friends, come join the Men's Academy. You might just find your best friends there and have the best conversations of your life. I'm traveling the world with a couple people from the Men's Academy. There's a link below to talk to me about that one-on-one. I would love to support you on your path and connect you with amazing, incredible men. And also, you can click here about the invisible staircase method, about finding your ideal, finding your purpose, and walking towards that in your solar light, my friends. Let me know if you like this video. I have 3 more coming out on solar spirituality because it feels so close to home. Anyways, peace.